Well, hello everyone, and you join us here today. It is a new year, and we're going to have some new conversations, and with some new people too. Morning, Tom. How you doing?
Hello. Yeah, good. 2023 is coming up roses, even if that's a lie.
I'm sick of it already. Let's introduce someone else to this conversation before we kill each other. James Britton McVey, how are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. However, I did just battle through the new 2023 January gym users this morning, which I'm hoping will drop off quickly. I hate that first week of January, mate. It's horrible. But other than that, I'm great, thank you.
All the machines all ready and sweaty for you before you even get in. Lovely, lovely.
Wait till Friday, it'll be fine.
I hope so.
For our viewers and listeners who don't know who you are, James, why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is James Britton McVey. I'm an OnlyFans professional, and I also like watches. No, I'm joking. I'm a musician. I play guitar, write songs, do backing vocals in a band called the Vamps, and this is our 10th year doing it, so starting to feel quite old in the industry. But the main point is I do love watches as well.
Absolutely, and so you're here mainly to talk about watches, but Tom and I are both failed musicians, and so I imagine that we are both equally jealous of your achievements.
Hang on, I haven't given up yet.
Oh. You have played such venues as the O2, you've toured with Taylor Swift, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
You have done the shiny metal with your records, which I can't remember which one. Gold?
I'm going to sound like a knob. We have a few different accolades, so I don't know which one you're on about. However, I can't remember. I think our Meet the Vamps album, which was our first one, is platinum. I'm just looking at it again. I sound like an absolute knob, but people won't be able to see this. But this is the only room I'm allowed to hang Vamps memorabilia in. So I'm just looking around to see what's on the wall. We have a couple of gold singles, and then basically that. I'll be honest, I don't know. But very lucky to be doing, as I say, the Vamps for 10 years. Done a fair few tours, and we're going to start our 6th album probably later this year. But enough about my awards. Let's move on.
It's utterly incredible what you've achieved, and like I said, I'm hugely jealous. But you're not just a fan of music; you're a fan of old things, aren't you? You like to collect old things.
I do. I don't know where it started. I think it might maybe originate from when I was sort of 6 or 7. My dad made me watch the Longest Day, which is like a John Wayne, I think it's an early 60s or even maybe late 50s World War II movie, like black and white, and I loved it, and that kind of kick-started my love of, the D-Day landings primarily, but then that kind of spilt over into history in general, and it's led to me acquiring a few bizarre artifacts, and if anyone wants a little laugh whilst listening to this, go on my Instagram and see my reaction to opening a ancient Egyptian artifact, which I was hoping was going to be slightly larger than it was, but I have a few weird things.
Do they not do banana for scale with ancient Egyptian artifacts when you buy them?
Well, you know what's funny actually with that, so there's a website that's kind of like porn for nerds like me, and they sell stuff from all across the 8 different ages and different parts of the world. And on most of the links to products you can buy, they do say the size. On this one in particular, it's like a little amulet. It just says size, and then it's like N/A, and I was like, I don't really know what that means, but the picture's pretty good. It's like, it looks like it's you could hold it at least, and well, you can't. So I've not got it out of the box since it arrived.
Oh, it's one of the funniest videos I've seen in a long time, because you kind of know where it's going, but you have no expectation for where it actually ends up.
So bad.
But you like watches too. You have a few watches. We won't talk about all of them, because I think you want to keep one for our primary conversation. But tell me a little bit how you got into watches and where all that's at.
Well, I think off the bat, I'm not one of these collectors that necessarily knows loads and loads, and I think I had these dreams when I started collecting 4 or 5 years ago that by this point I would be like aroused over different movements like you are. And I do find that interesting, but I think I've realized what's the point in trying to like lie and portray myself as someone I'm not. So the reality is I have a very, very enthusiastic father-in-law who is, he's called Steve, and he's the reason that I got into watches. And the first watch I purchased in 2017 was my Rolex Submariner Date. And I love it. And that kind of sort of opened that, it knocked on that door that then led to, I think, typically with most of us in this watch world, a spiral into, watch-loving oblivion. And now I have monthly arguments with my wife about purchasing, another Grand Seiko, or buying a new sofa. We literally had this argument yesterday. So I think initially I was attracted to, I guess, the aesthetic of certain watches, but not perhaps in the way that a lot of people are, where they look at like, I don't know, Richard Mille or even like, like the latest Patek. I think maybe because I'm interested in older things, I'm drawn to things that maybe have a vintage look. So I know people aren't necessarily overjoyed about that sort of fake patina look of watches, but for me, I'm all about that. And maybe also like other watch collectors, you can't necessarily afford, like the 1655 Steve McQueen in inverted commas Explorer 2, but you might be able to get a Tudor that has a similar aesthetic. I'm not going to spend 30 grand on like an old watch yet, but so I'm all about finding things that kind of I feel something for, and that's perhaps why the watches that I've acquired are maybe not the sort of like the go-to pieces in someone's collection. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool, and it actually leads us very nicely onto the topic that we're going to discuss, which is watches that look much more expensive than they actually are. And since you're on a roll, James, why don't you start off with the watch that you're pitching to us as looking more expensive than it actually is, and Tom and I will just disagree with you for the sake of disagreement.
I don't know if you will disagree with my pick, because everyone that I've seen speak about this has said it's their favourite launch. Well, it was their favourite launch of Tudor last year. I keep on thinking we're still in 2022. People have probably guessed what it is. Black Bay Pro from Tudor, which for me, as I said, I'm a sucker for older Explorers, Explorer 2, sorry. And again, there's no way I'm going to spend sort of north of 25 grand on one. So when the Pro came out, it actually came at a really annoying time, because I just bought my Rolex Explorer 2, which for me, as in like the latest, I think this is 2022. Yeah, 2022 launch. So obviously not vintage, but I was very, very, very lucky to be able to get an Explorer 2 at retail. So I'm a big Explorer 2 fan. And I was like, I bought that. That is me kind of stuck for another 18 months of arguing with my wife before I can get another watch. And then all of a sudden, Black Bay Pro drops, and I was like, oh no. And I knew I had to have it. I absolutely, true GMT, 39mm, got the date. For me, it ticks every single box. A bit of sort of fake patina, numeric bezel. I love it. I think for me, it could be like a one watch collection piece, and I knew I had to have it. It's come around the world with me, and I love it. It's perfect.
And what's the price on the Pro versus the Explorer 2?
So, I mean, you're going to probably struggle getting one at retail, I think, even still. In fact, I saw one in a shop the other day, and for actual sale, and I was quite surprised. But I think, am I right in saying that you can get, it depends on the configuration, strap versus bracelet, but I think you're starting around 3,100. I may have just made that up. Around there, early 3,000s. But, I mean, I think you get a lot of watch for your money there. But I think that if you're, if we're speaking about that vintage Explorer 2, they were over 30 grand at one point. I'm not sure where they're at now, but definitely over 20 grand, closer to 30, I'd imagine. And I think that you can take the Black Bay Pro round the world if you want to, bash it up, and not have to worry about damaging it in the same way that you would with that vintage Explorer 2.
Yeah, true, definitely true of the vintage. The new Explorer 2 is still, if you can find it at RRP, like you were lucky to do, it's still an £8,100 watch.
Yeah, I actually I got screwed there a little bit because I didn't realise that I was having the 10% price rise. I put my name down, and then by the time it came up, it was, oh, that's another 600 quid or whatever it was. Oh my god! But you know what? You are right. I think for me, that's why, you know, I sort of hinted at it before. I'm not drawn to the go-to hype in inverted comma watches. I'm not fussed about Daytonas particularly. For me, the Explorer 2 and, you know, consequently the Black Bay Pro, that's where I'm at. So being able to have an Explorer 2 and a Black Bay Pro in my collection, that kind of like ticks every box for me.
Yeah, and the fact that you've got both makes it a really interesting comparison for you to share on. Wearing one and wearing the other, what are the differences that you notice that would make the Rolex worth more, aside from the fact that it says Rolex on the dial?
Well, yeah, good point. I'm toying with the idea of doing one on each wrist and be like, whoa, you know, but I'm not that man. I think it's, you know what, it's really, really tough to kind of pick between them. And actually, in a way, the fact that the Pro is slightly smaller, you know, 39 millimeters, I'm going to regret saying this. I actually think I prefer the Pro to the Explorer 2 that I have. Now, you know, it would be very different if I was comparing it to a vintage one, but I think for me, the Pro wears easier. I think the Rolex, I love it. It is one of my favorite watches, but I just think the dial of the Pro with that sort of like fake patina, it just works for me. I don't know why. I'm just looking at them both now, and for me, I find myself wearing the Pro more than the Explorer 2, and also, especially living in London, I know that there's a strong chance I might lose my arm at some point getting mugged for a Rolex, and I think the Pro is it's one of those watches that, I mean, to be fair, it does look like a Rolex, but you really have to know what you're stealing to get a Pro off someone. I think a Rolex is a bit more, look at me, I'm wearing a Rolex. And I also like that as another point. It's slightly more understated, the Black Bay Pro. It doesn't feel like I'm wearing a Rolex. It feels like I'm wearing something cool, a little bit niche. And yeah, as I say, I find myself wearing the Pro a lot more actually than the Explorer 2, which really did surprise me.
One of the things that I really think works about Tudor, because Rolex has gone storming off into the distance, but at least they've left behind a crumb for people who like the vintage aesthetic. Because we see Omega will dig into its back catalogue and do reissues, and it ends up with a bit of a muddled model line, doesn't it? Where you can buy the modern Speedmaster or the old style Speedmaster. Whereas Rolex has gone, right, Tudor is for the guys like us who like that vintage look. And actually, I would say that the Rolex Explorer 2, when you look at the hands, they're really wide, aren't they? It's almost slightly cartoonish in a way. And I'm the same. They're big words from you, for sure, but I think I agree. I think the Pro is the better watch. I think we're all in agreement there that the Pro certainly punches well above its weight when it comes to cost. Tom, what are you going to throw into the mix that you think looks more expensive than it is?
Well, I thought I'd go for something a bit budget, but that's a Bobby Dazzler. So I headed on over to Seiko. So I found something in the Presage line, which, if you're aware of Seiko's various different collections, the Presage is something that offers traditional Japanese craftsmanship, you know. In particular, there's the cocktail time range.
Very stupid name, but go on.
So yeah, it's the Aviation, which is a confusing name for a watch. I think that's the name of the cocktail that it's inspired by, but well, in Japan's swanky Ginzo region in Tokyo, they have cocktails every day at 5 in the communication hour or something, I don't know, but seems like a pretty good pretense to hang a watch design on, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, James, you're going to Japan soon, aren't you?
I am, yeah. Start of next month. Yep.
Nice.
Will you be contributing to the cocktail time at 5 p.m. in the whatever it was district?
5 p.m. is a little bit of a difficult time for me to start drinking because we don't go on stage until about 9 o'clock. So if I start at 5, I may not make it, which has very nearly happened before to all of us in the Vamps. I maybe a virgin mojito or something at 5 o'clock. Yeah. So
this is a cool watch. Seiko, I think, really does. well, they make so many watches but have this kind of Japanese attention to detail. So they've got the benefits of volume, but also the benefit of that obsession in making something good.
I think Seiko's great, and I think a lot of people are hesitant to like go out of the whole Swiss watch world. And to be fair, I was, but I'm a huge fan of Grand Seiko, and my father-in-law Steve is a huge Seiko fan. So I'm really excited, and I can see my kind of future watch journey going over to Japan more than Switzerland, to be completely honest.
I was just looking at the dial of that Presage, Tom.
It's so sophisticated, isn't it? It just I mean, that's the thing. It's like, this is a £390 watch. So
I think we set a slightly different challenge for this particular watch. Dear viewer and listener, can you find a watch that looks more expensive than this one for this price or less? I think you'd struggle.
I have to agree with you guys. I think it's great. The dial is really interesting, and you know, the price point it's crazy. Like I would have one of them, genuinely. I think it's lovely.
Focus, James. Focus. You've got that goal. You've got the goal watch. You keep being distracted by other watches.
I know.
Here's something I especially love about this Presage cocktail time, and this is incredibly Japanese. You look at the case diameter, it's not 39 millimeters, it's not 40 millimeters, it's not even 39 and a half millimeters, it's 39.52 millimeters, and they would probably say, or thereabouts.
Yeah. It wears like a 39.5 millimeter watch, though, I would say.
Oh, what an absolutely legendary brand. And they really are kind of underpinning that affordable entry point. And do you know what? If it didn't say Seiko on the dial, because I think if someone saw that it said Seiko, they'd say, oh, it costs $100, and you'd be really annoyed. But the fact that everything else, if you took the Seiko badge off and you put Longines on there, for example, people would say it costs $3,000.
Yeah.
So that's a very good shout, Tom. I am going to pitch a watch, and I think it's probably going to be a very, very predictable choice for a watch that looks more expensive than it is. Are you guys familiar with the Christopher Ward C1 Bel Canto?
Yeah, that watch that you've been banging on about non-stop for the last month. Yeah, I think I might have heard of it.
All right, let me rephrase the question. Are you guys familiar with Christopher Ward?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I am indeed.
But not as much as I am now.
Well, exactly, yeah. Christopher Ward, for me, was this thing that sat in the kind of the periphery. I knew they existed. I knew they did affordable watches. And in fact, James, they have a watch that is very much like the Explorer 2. Have you ever been tempted by them before?
Yeah, well, again, I feel like every time I do anything watch related, I mention Steve, father-in-law, a lot. He introduced me to Christopher Ward probably 5 years ago, and again, I being very new in the watch world, I wasn't aware of them, but I was really, really impressed. I don't even know which one he has. I can't remember, but I think he does have one that looks quite Explorer 2-ish. So yeah, I am very interested by them, and he is the sort of person that would say he wasn't happy with a purchase that he'd made if he wasn't, and he's really, really impressed. But I think this launch from Christopher Ward is like, I was just looking on the website there, and like their top kind of like press quote from on this watch is from Hypebeast, which is like, that kind of shows they've like pushed the envelope a bit with this one, and they're like, you know what, we're going to do something slightly different for us. And it could have gone either way. It could have, like we were sort of speaking before this, weren't we, that pictures are one thing, but actually having one, that kind of, sometimes you're disappointed. And I mentioned another release from last year that kind of, I guess, hype beast types would like, and I think people that got hands on with that particular watch were slightly disappointed with pushes falling off, etc. But this one, it seems to have really, really good reviews. And I'm rooting for the Pro, but I actually think that you might have this one, Andrew.
You're absolutely right. When you hold it, you see it. One of my first questions when I realised that yes, they really were going to sell it for less than £3,000, and yes, it really did have this quality. When we spoke to Mike France, the big boss at Christopher Ward, my first question was, how are you making money with this product? Because either you're making no money or the rest of the industry is making way too much.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. It's similar to what Seiko do, where you go, hang on, how is this watch £400? Why aren't they all £400 in that case? What's the secret? Why is this finally only just happening now? And when are we going to get some more of it? And why isn't everyone doing it?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I think we can double down this conversation as the perfect 3-watch collection as well. Those 3 watches together, you've got your dress watch, you've got your exploring watch, and you've got your complicated watch. I think that's it, isn't it?
I think that's another point to say is all 3 watches are kind of like cats amongst pigeons, aren't they, really? Like, you look at, especially the Christopher Ward, and you were alluding to that, Tom, but like, how have they done it? And then you look at some other companies that do similar things for like genuinely 10, 20, 30 times the price, and you're like, ouch, like you're screwing us over a bit when you can get something for under $3,000 or whatever. I think it's a really amazing move from Christopher Ward, and I like people and companies that are like, you know what, let's disrupt the market a bit. And for me, I think you're going to have a lot of people that maybe haven't even heard of Christopher Ward, but see this on like the Explore page whilst they're scrolling on Instagram, and their initial sort of reaction is, that looks amazing, regardless of who makes it, I'm interested. And then when you realize, oh, it's Christopher Ward, then it's just they're kind of like, moving the needle a bit, aren't they, with this? And I think they're going to get a lot of new fans. I'd be interested in seeing moving forward whether they can retain this new fan base. I'm intrigued to see what's coming next, whether there'll be like another version of this or whatever, but I think it's a great move from Chris Ward, but also Tudor and Seiko as well. I think all 3 companies have probably got a lot of new fans with each of these launches.
Yeah. 3 completely different brands coming at it from completely different angles to achieve a similar sort of goal, which is parting people like us with our money.
Yeah.
And well, there you have it. Those are 3 watches that really do pack in a lot of bang for the buck. Thank you, Tom. And thank you so much, James, for joining us. It's been an awesome privilege and pleasure to have you come and talk watches with us. We're going to put links in the description to your Instagram, Spotify, Apple Music. But what are you up to next that you want people to know about?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, both of you, for having me. Big fan. And for me, this is kind of like a little dream to be part of. Well, hopefully join the watch community, and I feel very welcomed. But so what's next? So I go to Australia in a couple of weeks to start the world tour leg of the Vamps 10-year anniversary tour, and then there might be a little bit of new released music, but perhaps not what fans of the Vamps would be expecting. And then, as I said earlier, maybe start album 6 talks at the end of the year, so a busy 2023. And I'd be lying if I said that there's not going to be any more watches this year. I already know that I'm going to get a couple more, so I'll keep you updated, and we'll speak about them in a future episode, hopefully.
Again, thank you so much. It has been a real pleasure. We'd love to have you on again talking more about watches in the future. And if you have a question for a real live music person who plays actual instruments, and people pay for him to do that, if you've ever had any interest in that and have any questions about that, pop them in the description below, because I have been bombarding James for the last 2 weeks with like, well, what's it like when you do this and what's it like when you do that, and it is all absolutely fascinating. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Me.